Number 3. Frank Green Jr. On September 12, 2009, the police went to the area around St. Boniface's Cemetery in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Around 1 a.m., someone had called them because they saw 5 suspicious men running across a commercial property. This was followed by the sounds of tires squealing. Officers arrived in the area and looked around for 45 minutes but didn't see anything unusual. The next morning, they returned to the area and continued to look. In the cemetery, they found the dead body of a young man. He was identified as 17-year-old Frank Green Jr. An autopsy determined that Frank had died a very violent death. He had been stabbed 9 times and sustained over 40 blows from kicks and punches. 8 of the 9 stab wounds were in his back. The police went to a nearby convenience store and they got their surveillance footage. The camera recorded a group of young men running from the area where the body was found. The police released 2 sketches of the suspects to the public. They suspected that the murder was part of gang activity that plagued Winnipeg's Filipino community. As Frank Green's family was grieving, someone shot a bullet through their front window. The police investigated the murder for almost 7 months. Then, in April 2010, 5 men, 3 of them 18 years old, and the other 2 being 17, were arrested and charged with Frank's murder. However, all of them were 17 years old at the time of the crime, so the authorities could not make their identities public. The 5 men were members of the Dynamic Crew gang. The victim, Frank Green, was not a member of a gang. But the 5 young men knew who Frank was, and they wrongly believed he had assaulted one of their friends. On the night of the murder, they came across Frank at a party. The 5 men had a barrage of weapons. They had 3 knives, a machete, and a collapsible baton. They led Frank to the cemetery, and when he realized what was happening, he tried to run away. As he tried to run, he was stabbed in the back and then beaten. In August 2011, one of the underage suspects, believed to have been the ringleader, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was then sentenced to 7 years in prison, the longest under Canada's Youth Justice Act. The man apologized to the family. He said, quote, "I would like to express my sincere regrets for my actions. I have had a good time to reflect. I have become a role model at the institution. I help others with schoolwork. I try to better myself every day," unquote. Green's family was disappointed with the verdict. Because of the severity of the crime, they thought the man should have been tried as an adult. If he had been convicted as an adult, he could have been sentenced to life in prison. A week later, the other 4 suspects also pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. 2 were sentenced to 3 years of prison with 4 years of community service, and the other 2 were sentenced to 4 years of prison with 3 years of community service. The men have all finished their sentences, and their current whereabouts are unknown. Number 2. Karapet Kalajian. On the afternoon of January 2, 2016, 71-year-old Karapet Kalajian drove to the cemetery, Bellevue Memorial Park in Ontario, California. Karapet was a father and grandfather. He was also a widower. His wife, 57-year-old Evangie Kalajian, had died 5 years earlier on January 3, 2011. Evangie had died after a long battle with breast cancer. Karapet took the death hard. He and his wife were Armenians, but it's unclear whether they came to the United States together or if they met stateside. Nevertheless, on the eve of the 5th anniversary of his wife's death, he sat in his car close to her grave. Then his wife's sister, 59-year-old Karapet Kalajian, and her 60-year-old husband, Mizak Kalajian, arrived at the cemetery. An older relative who used a walker and who wasn't identified was with them. Suddenly, Karapet exited his car and approached his sister-in-law and brother-in-law. Over the past year, Karapet had become estranged from his extended family. What caused the split between Karapet and his extended family wasn't made public. 71-year-old Karapet then opened fire on Mazak and Haripsmi. He then turned the gun on himself. All three were pronounced dead at the cemetery. The older woman was unharmed. The police found a 4-page note written by Karapet. The police did not reveal a motive, but they said that Karapet had been planning the murder. He laid in wait for his in-laws. Karapet Kalajian was buried beside his wife, just a few feet from where he died after murdering her sister and her sister's husband. Mazak and Haripsmi Mazanian were buried in a different cemetery a few miles away. Number 1. Jessica Keene. In 1991, Jessica Keene was a popular and well-liked student at her Columbus, Ohio high school. The 15-year-old was a cheerleader and honor student who loved to sing and play the piano. Jessica also loved animals and wanted to be a zoologist. Jessica showed strong potential as a child. In grades 4, 5, and 6, she was in a program for gifted students. However, her friends noticed a change in her when her family moved from Kettering, Ohio to Columbus, Ohio when she was 12. Notably, she started hanging out with older kids. When she was 15 years old, she started dating 18-year-old dropout Sean Thompson. Jessica's mother, Rebecca Smiley, did not like that they were dating. She felt that her daughter was too distracted. Jessica's grades dropped after the pair started dating, and then she quit cheerleading. She also started skipping school to see Thompson. Rebecca told Jessica that she couldn't see Thompson until her grades improved. Jessica was upset and threatened to leave the home. They ultimately decided it would be best for Jessica to spend 2 weeks at Huckleberry House, a youth live-in center. On March 15, 1991, Jessica was coming to the end of her 2-week stay. She was planning on going home the next day. That afternoon, Jessica was talking to her boyfriend, Sean Thompson, on the phone. They argued and broke up. Jessica was visibly upset. She told a friend she was going to the mall. She was seen at a bus stop near the youth center around 6 p.m. After that, 15-year-old Jessica Keene went missing. When she wasn't back for curfew, she was reported missing. About 42 hours after Jessica was seen at the bus stop, her body was found in the Foster Chapel Cemetery. The cemetery was about 20 miles from the bus stop where she was last seen alive. She was struck in the head with a blunt object and left for dead. She was only wearing a bra and one sock. Investigators suspected that someone, or possibly a pair or group of people, abducted Jessica at the bus stop. The police used clues found in the cemetery to piece together her final moments. Based on the time of death, investigators believed she was held for at least 6 hours. During that time, she was raped. They believe she managed to flee from her abductor and hid behind a tombstone in the cemetery. Behind the tombstone in mud, there were knee impressions. It was dark, and the area's only light source was a farmhouse. They think Jessica ran towards it. Unfortunately, there was a fence that was hard to see in the dark. As she ran towards the house, she collided with the fence. This gave her assailant time to catch up with her, and he bludgeoned her to death. Semen samples were found on Jessica, suggesting that her attacker had raped her 2 to 4 hours before he killed her. The killer also took her gold pendant with the word "taken" on it. Jessica's boyfriend, Sean Thompson, immediately became a suspect. But when the police went to question him, he was nowhere to be found. It turned out he was in Florida with friends. He was questioned when he returned to Columbus. Thompson claimed he had nothing to do with the murder. Thompson said shortly after breaking up with Jessica, he and his friends left for Florida. He said he was in Florida at the time of the murder. They got a sample of his DNA and compared it to the killer's DNA. It was not a match, so he was cleared as a suspect. After that, the murder of Jessica Keene went cold. Jessica's mother, Rebecca Smiley, was understandably heartbroken over her daughter's murder. Rebecca said, quote, "What they did to her, the fear that Jessica felt, she would do anything to get away. And I can feel her heartbeat running through the cemetery. I can feel the deep breathing she was probably doing when she knelt behind the tombstone. I can hear her praying, and I realized that that was the worst thing that I believe anyone could go through," unquote. Jessica's family put a cross on the fence post at the cemetery, hoping it would keep her memory alive. It turned out they had to wait 17 years before the police made a breakthrough in the case. DNA testing was done in 1991 using technology that was available at the time. They did not have a strong enough profile to put it into the FBI's combined DNA index system, also known as CODIS, which launched in October 1998. Then in 2008, new testing was done with more advanced technology. The DNA was entered into CODIS, and they got a match the same day. It was the DNA of 51-year-old Marvin Lee Smith. Smith was arrested in Columbus in early 1991 for assaulting 2 women. On February 4, 1990, he approached a 29-year-old woman at a bus stop. He offered her $10 to have sex with him, and she refused. He then punched her in the face and tried to pull her into his car. But he couldn't get her into the car, so he tried to run her down. The woman escaped and reported the assault to the police. Then, in December 1990, he kidnapped a 20-year-old woman from a bus stop. He took her home and sexually assaulted her. He pleaded guilty to the crimes and served 9 years in prison. In 1996, Ohio passed a law requiring felons to submit DNA samples. When he left prison in 2000, Smith gave a DNA sample. In early 2008, when Smith's DNA was linked to Jessica's murder, the police tracked him down. Smith was living in Burlington, North Carolina. In April 2008, he was arrested while working a shift at Walmart. Smith confessed to the police that he killed 15-year-old Jessica Keene. In March 1991, he was 31 years old and he was out on bond, awaiting trial for assaulting the 2 women. He said he acted alone when he kidnapped and raped Jessica. Smith said that Jessica escaped from his car near the cemetery. He chased after her and she slammed into the fence. He pulled a 70-pound headstone out of the ground. He used the tombstone to bludgeon her to death. The headstone broke in 2 when he slammed it into her head. Smith tossed the broken pieces over a nearby fence. During the initial investigation, the police found the 2 bloody tombstone pieces. The murder weapon had not been publicly known information. Although Smith had attacked 2 other women at bus stops within a 3-mile radius within 13 months of Jessica's murder, he had not been a suspect before the DNA match. In February 2019, Marvin Lee Smith pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, kidnapping, and rape. Smith pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal that spared him the death penalty. He was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. At the time of this video, 68-year-old Marvin Lee Smith is serving his sentence at the Correctional Reception Center in Orient, Ohio. He will be eligible for parole in 2038 when he is 83 years old. Thank you so much for watching today's video. We just want to remind you we started a channel membership where half the funds will go to solve a cold case. For more information, click on the video that's on the screen now. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.